Did you know last week that Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, and T. Higgins were going to have huge games in Week 15? Well, we had an idea. That's why we put them on our Booms video. So who's going to be this week that helps carry your team to victory? Now, before you start setting your lineup for your fantasy teams, don't forget to get your picks in on Underdog, those NFL pick'ems. And you can start with a free one if you're new to Underdog. As a new customer, you get this free pick. And this week, Justin Herbert just needs 1 yard. Take the higher on 0.5 total yards, and you'll win that pick, along with any other pick that you like. Just make sure when you sign up on Underdog for the first time, use code ENDGAME because it gets you the free pick plus up to $1,000 of bonus cash. Now with the playoffs underway, you're going to have some tough choices between a lot of good options, hopefully on your roster. Let's start with some running backs you should definitely feel good about this week.
You should definitely feel good about Jahmyr Gibbs this week. In fact, I'm going to say you should feel so good about Jahmyr Gibbs that you have to start him. And by have to start him, it means I don't care who your other running backs are. You have to start Jahmyr Gibbs this week. There is no David Montgomery. He is for sure out. You look at last year, there were 3 games without David Montgomery. The first game was, I think, in week 3 last year. Remember, it was only Jahmyr Gibbs' third game. Didn't have a great game. The Lions didn't fully trust him yet as a rookie. But then look at the other 2 games later in the year when they did trust him. 20 and 31 touches in those games. 126 and 189 yards in those games. He finishes the overall RB1 and the overall RB3 in those weeks. He's averaging over 20 expected fantasy points the last 2 games with David Montgomery playing. Now he gets his backfield to himself. Craig Reynolds is barely going to see the field. They are going to let Jahmyr Gibbs be the absolute workhorse running back here. He leads all running backs this year with an explosive run percentage of 10.8. To put that in perspective, second place, Isaac Guerendo, is at 8%. This guy is the most explosive running back in the NFL right now. Not to mention, this is a smash matchup for him. The Bears allow the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. And if you look back at the game on Thanksgiving a few weeks ago, he only, for some reason, got 9 carries in that game because the Lions decided to, force feed David Montgomery. But on those 9 carries, he had 87 yards and averaged over 9 yards per carry against this defense. I'm going to say it again. He isn't just a must-start running back. He is my RB1 this week. I can't put any other running back over him. Jahmyr Gibbs has a chance to absolutely go crazy this week.
Well, there might be some trust issues this week with Jonathan Taylor. And in fact, some of you maybe aren't advancing to the playoffs because of Jonathan Taylor. Of course, you're probably not watching here because it's too late. But despite the fact that somehow 8%, almost 8% of fantasy teams in the playoffs lost because Jonathan Taylor decided to drop the ball before the goal line. If you still did advance, you're still in it, and you have Jonathan Taylor, I know you're tempted to just rage bench him or just, keep him on the bench and try another running back. Don't do it. Look, it's redemption time for him. Everybody loves a good redemption story. Besides that one mistake, which Jonathan Taylor is not known for doing things like that, right? This is what made it so surprising. This isn't Deshaun Jackson we're talking about here. Jonathan Taylor is not going to do that again. He's not a guy who fumbles it. And in fact, he actually had a good game, would have had a really nice game if that touchdown would have counted. He had 107 yards rushing before then. And before that, he had 96 yards rushing the week before. This is a guy who's still one of the best running backs in the league. He's still going to get a ton of carries. Nobody else is getting touches in that backfield. And although the Colts aren't looking great on offense these days, it's not because of the run game. It's because of the quarterback situation. Anthony Richardson just not taking any more steps forward. That won't matter this week against Tennessee because let's face it, Tennessee is objectively worse than Indianapolis. And this defense is continuing to kind of regress negatively. They, on the last month of the season, have become a bottom 10 run defense, averaging almost 4.5 yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs. Jonathan Taylor could be in for another 100-yard game pretty easily, and you know what? This week, maybe actually crosses the goal line. We still have plenty more picks for you, but first, don't forget, hit the like button and subscribe if you feel like we're helping you out. All right, let's stick at the running back position. I know you think Gibbs could be the RB1. I think this guy might be in contention.
Yeah, I can't go quite that high on James Conner, but I think he's a locked-in, no doubt, top 10 running back, maybe even with top 5 upside this week. You look at it last week with Amari Demercado out, who is now on IR, by the way, so he is not coming back. And rookie Trey Benson leaving early in that game, had 16 carries, ran 61% of the routes, and also had 5 targets. had a monster game last week. One of the top scoring running backs, scored 2 touchdowns. He was basically the Cardinals offense, and he's been most of the Cardinals offense all year. He's been really, really good. Now this week, he gets the best possible matchup against the Carolina Panthers. They're allowing 141 rushing yards per game. To tell you how bad that is, second place is allowing 115. They're also the only defense that is now allowing over 5 yards per carry to running backs, and they are tied for the most rushing touchdowns allowed on the season. This is an absolute smash spot for James Conner. Not sure about Trey Benton's status yet, but I'm guessing if he plays, he's barely going to play, if he even plays at all. And that means it's going to be basically James Conner and DJ Dallas. I don't think we're going to see a lot of DJ Dallas in this game. This should be another great game for James Conner. He should run wild against this terrible Panthers defense, get catches, probably score at least 1, maybe 2 touchdowns again. You have to lock James Conner in your lineups this week if you can at all possible.
And thankfully, I think it's time to just go back to making Bucky Irving a lineup lock. This is a guy who we thought could be a league winner down the stretch based on the schedule and how great he was. And then last week, it was one of those really tough situations where we just didn't know if he was healthy. I mean, we saw him leave early, very early the week before after doing nothing. The back was bothering him. He barely practiced. So all he did was go out and run for 117 yards against one of the top run defenses in the league in the Chargers. I think he's good. Yeah, and if he's good, I'm playing him. Bucky Irving has been so good for the past month. He has been averaging, if you take out that one game where he got hurt and only had 3 carries, over the past 4 games, averaging 6.6 yards per carry. That's right. And he's still one of the leading rushers in terms of average in the NFL. I mean, if this guy was out there on a consistent basis every week since week 1, who knows what his yardage total would be. But I do know he's in a smash spot again against the Cowboys defense. And look, I know the Cowboys have actually been better against the run. Not only did they really kind of shut down Chuba Hubbard last week, they have been better. I don't want to mislead you and, lead you to believe this is a team that's just going to roll over and let him run wild. Bucky will have to earn his yardage, but he will, because he has done this even against good defenses, as we've said. I also don't think, like last week where the Cowboys got a jump on the Panthers early, I don't feel like that's going to happen against the Bucs, because the Bucs have a really good offense. So not worried about the matchup, not worried about Bucky's health, and I'm starting him no matter what. I also am definitely going to take his pick on underdog, because 72.5 yards, he could easily smash that. Like I said, he's done that over the last couple of games with no problem. And in this matchup, definitely taking that. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're signing up for the very first time on Underdog, you get a free pick that Justin Herbert just going for 1 yard. Combine it with this pick or any other pick you like. You have a great chance to win right off the bat. All right, time to dig a little bit deeper. These are some more flex type options, some guys you're not quite sure about, but we're feeling pretty good this week.
I'm feeling very good about Jakobi Meyers this week. I would have felt great about Jakobi Meyers last week as well, except we had a good feeling it was going to be Desmond Ridder, and unfortunately it was. But this week it sounds like Aiden O'Connell is going to be back. It actually sounds like he was close last week. Head coach Antonio Pierce, who I'll admit does not have the best track record, says he feels good and hopeful that Aiden O'Connell is going to play. And if he does, I think you have to fire up Jakobi Meyers. Even with that dud, I guess you can say, last week, he still came through with 10 PPR points. But more importantly, he had 10 targets in that game. Since week 3, he's had 9 or more targets in 8 games, and he hasn't gone below 6 targets in any of those games. But more importantly, in 7 games, he's had at least 60 yards and 6 or more catches. So he at least gives you a very high floor. But this week, I think he also gives you a very high ceiling, because it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are allowing the 3rd most points to wide receivers. Not only that, they're allowing the 2nd most yards per game to wide receivers and the 5th most touchdowns per game to wide receivers. In this matchup, as long as it's Aiden O'Connell, I think Jakobi Meyers is going to get a ton of targets, a ton of yards, and has the potential to even score a touchdown, which means he has the potential to boom. So if you're looking for a flex with upside or a wide receiver 3 with upside, put Jakobi Meyers in your lineup, again, assuming O'Connell plays.
Well, I'm going to do something I had said a few weeks ago I was going to stop doing. I'm going to pick a Bears wide receiver, because I still think DJ Moore is a very strong start this week. It's the Lions, and before I talk about why that is an obviously great matchup for him, let's keep in mind that as disappointing as the Bears have looked the last couple of weeks, as bad as Caleb Williams has been, especially throwing that deep ball, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen have still been getting by and scoring you points. So last week, even though the Bears pretty much got rolled from the beginning, DJ Moore still came through with double-digit fantasy points, 8 catches on 46 yards. This is just continuing the trend since Shane Waldron was mercifully let go as offensive coordinator. DJ Moore hasn't seen fewer than 7 targets in a game. And just a couple of weeks ago, DJ Moore, against this same Lions team, had 8 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. And actually, it's not the same Lions team. It's worse because on defense, as you know, so many injuries there. I mean, it started when they lost their best pass rusher, Aiden Hutchinson. This team has gotten one of the lowest pressure rates ever since that time. But then they lost another corner in Carlton Davis. They lost Alan McNeil, their defensive tackle. They also have already lost Alex Anzalone, one of their linebackers, and several other players. I mean, the injury list is so long for Detroit, it's amazing that they're still able to field the team. But this defense is giving up a ton of points. They're now bottom 5 against wide receivers in terms of fantasy points allowed. DJ Moore already has had a good game against them, might have an even better game this week. And it's not always just the matchup that matters. Sometimes you're just going to go with an offense that is clicking.
Yeah, the Bills are definitely clicking right now, and the wide receivers are a little bit hard to trust here, except for Khalil Shakir. He has mostly been good this season, and even though the Patriots on paper look like a tough matchup for wide receivers, they're actually great for slot wide receivers. Khalil Shakir plays out of the slot 72% of the time. Patriots are allowing the 5th most points to slot wide receivers. You look at it this year, we have seen some slot wide receivers have huge games against them. Way back in week 2, Jackson Smith-Njigba, 12 catches for 117 yards. And if you remember, outside of that game, he did nothing for half the season, but he went off against this defense. Cooper Kupp, 6 catches, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. Even last week, Greg Dortch led the Cardinals with 60 receiving yards. Now, 60 receiving yards isn't a big game, but it's a pretty big game for Greg Dortch. This team struggles against the slot because they have stud corner Christian Gonzalez, who's going to shut down whatever Amari Cooper is out there for, whatever Keon Coleman is out there for. He's going to shut those guys down. And that means Josh Allen is going to have to continually go to his main man, Khalil Shakir, who he likes to go to him anyways. Since week 7, he has 7 or more targets in every single game, and he has at least 50 yards in all but 2 games, and also at least 6 catches in all but 2 games. Also, over that stretch, he has 8 red zone targets. So he's not just a guy who's, racking up yards and catches. He's also a threat to score, and he's also a great yard after catch receiver. I think against this Patriots defense that has struggled all year against the slot, Khalil Shakir can get it done. So again, if you're looking for a deeper league flex, or maybe just a flex in your league, regardless it has upside, take a look at Shakir.
I know this week, this deep into the playoffs, it might be tough to trust any 49er at this point, especially running back. Well, let's not give up on Isaac Guerendo. In fact, this could be his best game of the season, which isn't saying much because he hasn't played a lot this season. But look, this is a guy we were all excited about until last week happened. And last week, it happened, right? And by that, nothing happened in that game for Thursday, except for the kickers, right? But let's just say that game is over with. It was a Thursday night flop. It happens. Isaac Guerendo, we weren't even sure if he was going to play with that foot sprain. He was the only running back who even got carries. All right, he got all 16 running back carries. I'm not counting Debo. So he's going to be the guy who's getting all the carries here. Should see even bigger workload. Got a week and a half basically to get healthier because it was Thursday night. I think he's good to go. And those who were paying attention earlier in the video, Chris told you that Jahmyr Gibbs had the highest explosive rate in terms of runs this year. And number 2, Isaac Guerendo. He doesn't necessarily need the volume, but he's going to get it. He's going to get probably upwards of 15 touches again, if not 20 plus. And even though this defense hasn't been terrible against the run, I think that's also a little bit misleading. So Miami at this point in the season have kind of a middle of the road type of defensive status against the run specifically. But they've also had the 3rd easiest schedule against running backs, according to Mike Clay. From week 1 up through 15, really, Miami hasn't had to face a tough schedule versus running backs specifically. So though they have only given up 200-yard games to running backs, they haven't faced really a murderer's row of running backs specifically. Isaac Guerendo doesn't need necessarily to get that many touches. He has that explosiveness. He could make that big play. Dolphins do give up touchdowns to running backs. I think this could be Guerendo's kind of wake-up performance for this Niners offense. Now, we can't leave without giving you a tight end and a quarterback that you should feel good about this week. So here we go.
Well, last week I begrudgingly put Davante Adams on the booms, and he certainly did boom if you started Davante Adams. And this week I have to begrudgingly put Aaron Rodgers on here because if you're looking for a streaming option at QB, I think he's got to be your number one bet. For reasons that I cannot explain, the Jets have the third highest pass rate over expectation this season. Despite having one of the best defenses, despite having a good running game, they just decide they're going to throw the ball over and over and over again all game long. And look, it hasn't worked all year, but it's worked the last 2 weeks. Aaron Rodgers over the last 2 games, 628 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's the QB5 over the last 2 games. That's right. Sadly, Aaron Rodgers is a top 5 QB over the last 2 games. And now he gets a fantastic matchup at home against this Rams defense. They're allowing the 9th most points to QBs, the 12th most yards to QBs, and the 10th most passing touchdowns to QBs. I don't see any reason why the Jets are going to change what they're doing. Aaron Rodgers knows he's only got a couple more games left with this team, probably. He's just going to continue to chuck it all over the field to Davante Adams. So if you're looking for a streaming option this week and Aaron Rodgers is still out there, go pick him up.
And if you still need a tight end, I'm just going to go with the same guy I mentioned on the waiver wire video. Brenton Strange is far and away your best option, and he should be available in almost every league. Think Evan Engram, at least, well, Evan Engram when he was doing what he had done last year, getting a ton of catches, a big upside at tight end. For a team that really doesn't have a lot of other receiving options outside of Brian Thomas Jr., that's what Brenton Strange has become. And let's not forget, this guy was a pretty high draft pick and a pretty well thought of prospect the year before. Brenton Strange is a guy coming off a huge game. He had 12 targets, right? More than all the other receivers not named Brian Thomas Jr. combined. And that's not going to change because Doug Peterson's offenses will always throw to the tight end. And again, the other options aren't really that great. We're talking Parker Washington. We're talking Josh Reynolds, who I just found out is a Jaguar now. Go figure. But look, Brenton Strange is going to get a ton of targets, and this is a smash spot against the Raiders, not just because of the Raiders, but they are the 5th worst against tight ends. And with Max Crosby out, this defense is just continuing to get worse. Look, even Kyle Pitts caught 4 passes last week. If that doesn't tell you something about how bad this defense is, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, he only got 28 yards, but for Kyle Pitts, that was still more than he had in the previous 3 games combined. Chew on that. You didn't catch all of our start-sit advice at every position, plus all the other videos we do every week to help you win. You can still catch it here in the Week 16 playlist.